Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So just last week, AWS introduced this thing called Lambda Micro Virtual Machines, or MicroVMs. And the easiest way to think about them is they sit somewhere between Lambda functions, containers, and small virtual machines. So in this video, we'll build a MicroVM from a Docker image. I'll be following the documentation AWS provides, and I'll also show you in infrastructure as code, as well as showing you through the console, and eventually being able to interact with a MicroVM through the browser. So before diving into setting up these MicroVMs, I first want to discuss like when would you use these as opposed to something like ECS, EC2, Lambda itself. So within the documentation it says here, so interactive code environments, development environments where users can write and execute code in real time. Um, so some of the key things here is that they are really quick to spin up. Um, they provide high-level isolation of virtual machines, but they also provide the speeds of containers. So it's kind of a balance between the two. You can also see there's some security vulnerability assessment tools that need isolated environments to run. That's another example. And of course, AI code execution sandboxes. So yeah, scrolling down, we can see some of the key features here as well. So yeah, like I said, rapid startup, lifecycle control, flexible networking, flexible resource allocation. The cost is very similar to EC2 instances, um, and then some other benefits that they go into hibernation mode when not interacted with a certain time. Another important thing, as of Sunday, 28th of June 2026, it is only available in 5 regions, so North Virginia, Ohio, Oregon, Asia Pacific, and Europe, Ireland. So in today's video, I'll be using Europe, Ireland. Right, so as always, my code for this video is going to be in the link in the description stored in the GitHub. And another thing you need to make sure you've got is an updated AWS CLI tool. So if you was to run AWS Lambda MicroVMs help, you should see something like this returned. Let's get out of there. So the infrastructure as code provided today is essentially a wrapper around the create your first Lambda MicroVM documentation, which I'll also put in the description. They specify two things that are required as prerequisites, so an Amazon S3 bucket and an IAM build role. Um, these are both created within here. So here's the buckets, and I've also added some logging stuff, and there's also then here's the build role here. Another thing I do is actually the creation of the MicroVM image. Um, doing this so when I run the Terraform apply, it can actually build and upload the image to S3. So it will build and put something into here, so this HTTP API. Now what this is essentially just the HTTP server on port 8080 with a Docker file here as well. So if I head back to the documentation and scroll down, it's essentially just this, with this documentation here as well. We're then packaging it up, putting it in S3, and then this create the MicroVM image is what we're also doing within the Terraform. Now everything after this is the stuff we'll manually do, and I'll show in the next bit. But then the first thing we can do now is just run a Terraform apply. Whilst that's applying, I'll also explain some of the things within this creation of an image. So we're specifying the architecture, so I've gone for an ARM64. We're also specifying the memory. So if I go to the variables file, I'll be able to see the minimum memory we're passing it. And it could be any of these, and it will also scale for us as well if it ever hits a peak as well. And then you pass it a description. There's also networking stuff you can do, and then passing it the role we created above as well. Okay, so that's finished deploying. It took about 2 minutes 50 seconds, roughly 3 minutes, to create the image, push it up to S3, and then create the MicroVM within the console. If I now navigate to AWS, I can see that my YouTube HTTP API has been created, and that basically means now I can start this MicroVM. To do this, I can click on YouTube HTTP API. I can now select Run MicroVM. I'm going to pass it the role which my infrastructure as code created, and just select Run. Here we can see it's already in a running state. and we've been given a endpoint URL. So I'm going to navigate over now to my Chromium browser, paste the URL in, and we should see I'm going to fail to authenticate to this endpoint. Now, one thing we'll have to do is is to create an authentication token. An authentication token essentially sets a time and expiration time on it, and you can then also specify what ports you want to allow to your MicroVM. So here I'm going to say 30 minutes and on port 8080. Clicking create, it's now copied the token to my clipboard, and for this example I'm going to be using an extension called requestly. So I'm going to paste in the token using these two header keys, so AWS proxy port, passing it 8080, and AWS proxy auth, passing it that. So if I now save that, navigate back now to this page, and we can see that this has returned a successful message from our MicroVM. I would also now like to show you guys the process of creating a MicroVM through the console. So navigating to Lambda category, then clicking on MicroVMs. I can now click on create new MicroVM image, and then type in something like HTTP, API HTTP version 2, for example. The base image we'll just leave as default. Then instance size, so as talked about earlier, we can set the minimum for it to be, and we can also set the peak usage of what it can scale up to if it needs to. I'll also now select my S3 upload of a MicroVM app. So this is the Docker image which you've uploaded to S3. Select choose. I'll leave all the environment variables and stuff as default. I'm going to now specify the role which I created earlier as well, so Lambda MicroVM there. Also can do some networking logging, but we'll leave as default for now. So clicking create will now start this creation process of building the image that we stored in S3. And then upon this being completed, this is essentially where we got to with the infrastructure as code being deployed. Where we'll then see created here, and also the versions should be updated soon as well. Okay, so to wrap up this video, I just want to show the teardown process of getting rid of everything. So I will confirm the deletion of the manually created endpoint. I will now also go to the Terraform and run a Terraform destroy. So this will tear down the IAM role and the buckets, along with the logging that we also set up using this with a Terraform destroy command. If I then type yes, this will then start tearing that all down. Something I glossed over quite quickly was the README file. So to do all this infrastructure code that I did through the console, we can also run these CLI commands to get a similar output and run VMs as well. Another thing is within the apps, I've got a few more examples that we could use. So I've got an AI code sandbox, a CPU worker, and a system info that kind of just demonstrate the usage of MicroVMs. So that ends this video. So thank you very much for watching, and any questions, please leave them in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one.